What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's transfer tips for Game Week 7, where I'm going to go through some of the popular players being moved in and out of people's squads and discuss whether they are good moves or not. Before we talk about the first player, make sure you check out Sleeper using the link in the description below. They've got their Champions League pick'em game available now, which is completely free with prizes on offer. More on that to come later. So let's start with Mo Salah. Scored the penalty against Wolves and walked away with 10 points, but on another day he could have had even more returns as well. And that's actually his fourth double-digit haul of the season. So he's got a 14-pointer against Ipswich in Game Week 1, followed by a 10-pointer against Brentford, a 17-pointer against Man United, and now 10 points against Wolves. He's also got an assist against Bournemouth, and the only game he's blanked in the first 6 is Forest at home. So Salah is basically performing as we've come to expect. There's a reason that he was priced at 12.5 million yet again. He's got 4 goals, 4 assists in the first 6 matches, and he's looking great, and so are Liverpool. So there's no reason that can't continue. So why have 150,000 FPL managers sold him? I think this is just a sign of things to come over the next few weeks. It might not play out like this for the whole season because things always change in FPL, and what we think is going to be the case right now might not be the case in kind of 10 game weeks time. But at the moment, it feels like most of our transfers are just going to be concentrated on moving premium players around. Like, I look at my team and the transfers over the next few weeks. It's like, do I get Palmer in? Do I get Son? When do I get Salah? Do I consider selling Haaland? I'm not worried about which 4.5 million defender I've got or which cheap midfielder around 5.5. There's just not really any point messing around with them. So that's why people are selling Salah, because although he'll probably do okay over the next 3, the fixtures on paper are Palace away, which isn't a bad fixture, to be fair, given how Crystal Palace have performed so far this season. But Liverpool don't always do that well against Palace. Doesn't necessarily mean anything for this season, but it's not a fixture you would handpick. As bad as Palace might have been, you wouldn't necessarily want your attacker playing them away from home. Chelsea at home, I feel like that's the kind of game Chelsea could make difficult for Liverpool. I'm sure Liverpool will get chances. We saw Brighton score 2 against Chelsea, for example. But again, on paper, not great. And then Arsenal away is one of the toughest games you're going to get all season. So instead of having Salah, presumably people are moving on to Cole Palmer, who's a little bit cheaper. And so then you've got more money to spend. Or if you're on a Salah-only draft, you're probably moving back to Erling Haaland. And he's got Fulham at home, Wolves away, Southampton home. So if that's what you're doing, moving Salah to Haaland, I can't sit here and say it's a bad move. I know after Game Week 6, people are looking at their Haaland drafts, especially if they don't have Palmer, thinking, is this the way to go? Because those without Haaland, with like Salah, Palmer, Watkins up front, they've done really well. And now all of a sudden, non-Haaland drafts look great. That might not be the case after Game Week 7, 8 and 9. The same thing happened in Game Week 1, right? Salah did really well. Those of us with Haaland mostly didn't do as great. I'm sure some people did, but most of us didn't. But then a few hat-tricks later, you'll all of a sudden feel comfortable with him. So I think that's just, like I said, a sign of the things to come over the next few weeks. We're just moving premiums around. And it seems really odd to sell Salah when he's got 59 points in 6 games. Like, he's on 9.8 points per match, which is incredible. With the fixtures coming up and what other premiums have, I think it's okay to sell him. The only thing to say is you're probably going to want him back quite soon. Like Game Week 10, Brighton at home, Villa at home in 11 and Southampton away in 12. Like, he's a captain opportunity in those 3 game weeks potentially. And so I don't mind selling him, but I would definitely look at a plan for how you might want to get him back. Or sorry, how to get him back if you want him. So Champions League football is back tonight, which means you've got about 6 hours from the time this video is released to predict who's going to win, lose or draw every game in Matchday 2 over on Sleeper with their Champions League pick'em game. It's completely free to play and there's prizes on offer every single week. To download the app, all you need to do is click the link in the description below or scan the QR code on screen. It's super simple to submit your picks. So I'm just going to do my predictions for Tuesday. So I'm going to go for a few home wins. So Salzburg to win at home, Stuttgart, Leverkusen and Barcelona. Dortmund versus Celtic. Sorry, Celtic fans, if you're watching, I'm going to go for Dortmund. Inter Milan also to win at home. I'm going to go for away wins for Sporting and Man City. And then I think the hardest game to call on Tuesday is probably Arsenal versus PSG. I'm going to go for Arsenal at home simply because of how good their defence is. I think it'll probably be a low-scoring game, possibly a draw, but I'm going to go for an Arsenal win. Then all you have to do is submit your picks for Wednesday as well. And at the bottom is a tiebreaker question, which is how many total goals across all games. And I'm just going to go for 40, which is about an average of 2.5 per game. Might be too many, might be too little, but that's going to be my guess. And that is it. Super easy, completely free. There's other free games in the app as well. You can create leagues with your friends, etc. Loads of great stuff. Completely free. Link in the description below to get it downloaded, or scan that QR code on screen and get your picks submitted before the games start tonight. So let's talk about Luis Díaz next. Continues to be really popular despite blanking in game week 6. Over 150,000 transfers in so far this week. And he's been a bit all or nothing so far this season. So in 3 of the 6 matches, he's blanked: Ipswich, Forest and Wolves. And in the other 3 fixtures, he's got double-digit hauls, 14, 15 and 16 points. So overall, he's been great. 5 goals, 1 assist, brilliant returns for 6 matches, especially considering he started at 7.5 million. He's now 8 million. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes to 8.1 soon. The one thing that has continued is the early substitutions. Apart from Ipswich in game week 1, where he played 90 minutes, he hasn't made it past 72, which is what he got against Wolves. The other games are 71, 60, 65, and then 71 against Brentford in game week 2 as well. That looks set to continue, because Gakpo is also a really good option for Liverpool, who's also playing really well, by the way, in the matches that he's either come into, or the ones he started, like in the Champions League, the first game that Liverpool had. So Gakpo is an option as well. My worry moving forward is the same reason that I dodged him on wildcard. You could say infamously dodged him because it didn't go very well for me. But I just think at some point you're going to get a midweek game where Díaz starts, and then you're going to be worried at the weekend about whether he's going to play. So take the Champions League game this week that Liverpool have got at home. It's very likely Gakpo will start that. And so if Díaz gets 15 or 20 minutes off the bench, you're not going to be worried. You're going to expect him to start against Palace, right? That would look quite likely. And I think for the most part, he will start the Premier League games. But it's just not always going to be a guarantee. And then you've got the early substitutions on top. So I'm not saying anyone should sell him. Of course not, right? It's Palace away. I'm sure anyone that's got him is really happy to play him in that game. I get it. But I'm talking about buying him new if you don't already own. Like, is this the right time to get him? I'm not sure it is. And I know I've said this for a couple of weeks now, and then he went and got 16 points against Bournemouth. But I think the longer you've left it to bring him in, the worse of a pick he is. Okay, so he's blanked against Wolves, which was the best fixture between 6 and 9. Doesn't mean he's going to blank in the rest, of course, but it probably was on paper the best fixture. You've got slight worries about whether he's going to start if he ends up playing in one of the midweek matches instead, and he keeps getting subbed early. He's got to play Chelsea at home in 8, Arsenal away in 9. I would just think there's maybe slightly better options for the next 3 game weeks. From 10 to 12, Brighton at home, Villa at home, Southampton away, he could be great, as long as he starts all 3 of those games. And that's my worry. Now, I know that I'm quite biased against players like this. I like players that I know are always going to start. And in FPL, it doesn't always mean that gets you more points. But it does mean you've got less things to worry about. I said this last week when I didn't put him on my wildcard. At some point, he'll blank and then miss a game. And then the worry will really kick in for people. Some people will cope with that fine. But for others, it'll just be this, okay, well, now I've got to get rid of him. And I'm not a big fan of players like that. And I also just think the fixtures they've got coming up, he could be one to avoid. Like, you've got options like Maddison, really good fixtures coming up. Brennan Johnson's a little bit cheaper. That's maybe who I would be looking at instead. So again, relax if you're an owner. I'm not saying you should sell him. I'm also not saying he's a bad pick. I'm just questioning whether this is the right time to buy him. I would suggest maybe not. I mean, you could frame it a different way and say that 4 of the next 6 fixtures are amazing. And they are pretty good on paper. But the fact that Chelsea at home and Arsenal away have 2 of the next 3, I'm just not sure I would go there right now. Gvardiol, on the other hand, is a transfer in that I quite like this week, and nearly 100,000 FPL managers have already bought him in ahead of Fulham at home, Wolves away, Southampton at home and Bournemouth away, which on paper look pretty good for clean sheets. I understand that Man City are missing Rodri, and over the season that's going to be a huge miss. They won't win as many games as they would if he was fully fit, but they're still one of the best teams in the league. The defence is brilliant and the fixtures look good. And I wouldn't put too much emphasis on what happened against Newcastle, because Newcastle did cause them some problems. But at home, St James's Park is always difficult. Gordon leading from the front as that number 9 caused them problems. They were great in transition as well. But overall, I wouldn't expect that to happen a lot over the next 4 fixtures. I mean, Bournemouth away in 10 could be difficult. They like to press high. But City are also great from playing out from the back and keeping the ball. So I think there's a great chance of clean sheets over the next 4. He's also fallen from 6 to 5.9 million. I think his minutes are pretty secure, especially while Ake is out. If we go to the FPL page just for a second, Ake is expected back on the 20th of October. So that would be after the international break. So potentially from game week 8 onwards, Ake could be a problem. But given that he's been out, he's not going to get thrown straight into that side. And even when he is fit, I think Gvardiol is ahead of him in the pecking order for that left-back spot. Like Ake could even play as one of the centre-backs instead. So I think Gvardiol's minutes just look pretty good. The price is decent at 5.9, and he has that attacking threat as well. And I believe, I lose track sometimes of where I talk about stuff, but before game week 6, although he's not playing in that left wing role like he was at the end of last season, the numbers are still good. 0.06 expected goals per 90, 0.14 expected assists. He's still getting forward, as we saw for that goal against Newcastle. So I really like him as a short-term move. After Bournemouth away in 10, you've then got Brighton away in 11, Spurs at home in 12, Liverpool away in 13. So it's not quite as good. But then 14 onwards, it's Forest at home, Palace away, Man United at home, Villa away, Everton at home, Leicester away, West Ham at home. I think you could almost view it as a long-term pick. Now, is he going to start as many games from like game week 7 all the way down to 22, which is, by the way, in January? We probably shouldn't be looking that far ahead. Is he going to start as many games as like a Van Dijk or a Trent or someone like that? No, probably not. He will miss the odd one here or there. But I think when you compare him to other Man City defenders, the amount of starts and minutes he will get will probably be right at the top. So although the fixtures 11 to 13 are not great, I think you could view him as a longer-term pick. And also, Man City defence is just good, right? They could go and get clean sheets in some of these tougher fixtures. I think Spurs will make it tricky. Liverpool away definitely will. So it's not going to be easy. But I think you're putting him in as a premium defender and then probably just leaving him for a bit. Or you could just put him in 7 till 9 or 7 till 10 and then maybe move him on to someone like Pedro Porro if you don't have him instead. Either way, I think he's a good transfer in this week. So it feels like every week since game week 1, Danny Welbeck has been a pretty popular move for people. He's had another 100,000 transfers in already this week. And for most of the season, I've not favoured him that highly as an FPL option because I've always preferred João Pedro from Brighton with better minutes and on penalties. But of course, he's out injured. So at the moment, as a short-term move, I think Danny Welbeck's actually all right. I wouldn't want to play him against Liverpool away in 10 or City at home in 11 because as much as I rate that Brighton attack, they are just difficult fixtures for anyone. But if you've got someone that could rotate in or you're looking to wildcard soon, Danny Welbeck's probably all right. 5.8 million is not massively expensive. It's cheaper than the likes of Calvert-Lewin and Chris Wood. Presumably, while João Pedro is out, Welbeck will be on penalties. I think he took 1 or 2 in pre-season. And look, the next 3 fixtures are not perfect, but Spurs at home, Newcastle away and Wolves at home, Brighton could cause them problems. So I think Welbeck, the minutes look good. He's probably on penalties. The underlying numbers have been good this season as well. 0.42 non-penalty expected goals per 90. As a short-term pick, he's not bad. Now, with João Pedro, the problem is we don't know when he's going to be back. On the FPL page, they've got it as an unknown return date. I think Hertzler said he didn't think it was that bad, but they didn't know when he was going to be back. And he's a quick healer, but they won't rush him. And Hertzler's not been massively open with news at the moment, so I don't know how much we should take that into account. But at the moment, he is out. And even if João Pedro comes back, it's very likely that Danny Welbeck just keeps starting as the number 9. I think the only thing that João Pedro would do at the moment if he returned is reduce Welbeck's minutes a little bit. I think either way he starts, and obviously if João Pedro was back, he wouldn't have penalties. But I think for game week 7, you're fine. Then after the international break, are they going to rush João Pedro straight into the team? Not necessarily. The only other player that would likely see minutes as the number 9 is Evan Ferguson. And obviously, in previous seasons, he's been heavily touted as, the next £100 million player, going to get a big move. But at the moment, he's not playing that often. He is back fit, but they're really not rushing him in. And Danny Welbeck's just playing well, too. So that's not helping Ferguson either. So Evan Ferguson's had 22 minutes over the last 3 matches. Now, at some point, they might ramp them up, and that would cause problems for Welbeck. But that's not what we're seeing right now. So I think Welbeck is an okay short-term move if you don't want to go and get Chris Wood or Calvert-Lewin for the next 3 fixtures. But long-term, I think Brighton's fixtures get really good from 12 onwards. There is no guarantee that he's still getting decent minutes. No guarantee he would be on penalties. And I think at that point, if we're looking for someone for longer term, I would just go and buy Calvert-Lewin. But if it's for the next 3, I actually don't mind Danny Welbeck. It's probably the first time I've actually said that this season, because all the other times I've just preferred João Pedro, or we've not been looking at Brighton players. I think he could do well over the next 3. So I spoke earlier about how I felt like a lot of people at the moment are just moving premium attackers around, and that shows again with Bukayo Saka. Over 130,000 transfers out, and who's he about to play? Southampton at home. And I've said this many times before, in these videos, my aim is not to say this is right, this is wrong. I like to try and provide both sides of the argument if I can. So Luis Díaz, for example, I completely get why people are still buying him, but here's why I personally wouldn't do it at the moment. Obviously, you can then make your own decision. But sometimes there is stuff that just feels a little bit crazy or just doesn't feel right whatsoever. So ahead of Game Week 6 wildcard, I said I thought it was insane not to include Mbeumo. I think it's kind of insane to sell Saka before Southampton at home. I get why people are doing it. Saka's just blanked against Leicester. Palmer's just scored 25 points. I understand the frustration with Saka and the want to get Palmer in case he does it again. And Palmer himself is, of course, a brilliant pick. But if I was wildcarding in Game Week 7 for 2 weeks and I was going to get another wildcard in Game Week 9, I could only have one of Saka for Southampton at home or Bournemouth away, or Palmer for Forest at home and Liverpool away. I would pick Saka for the next 2 weeks. Long term, we can have a discussion about which one is better. Maybe that is Palmer. And I heard James on Planet FPL say that, Palmer just feels like a player that can go and get those 3-4 returns in a game. And you never really feel like Saka is going to do that. And I get that argument as well. And again, that might be a reason why Palmer is the better long-term hold. Like, he beat Saka for points last year. And he didn't start until like Game Week 7 or something like that. So I get it, right? I fully understand why people really want Palmer. I still don't think you can sell Saka before Southampton at home. It just feels crazy to me. Like, I once sold Rafinha for Leeds before Norwich at home. I didn't get massively punished, but I was punished a little bit. I think you need a really good reason to do it. And the only one I can think of is you really want Arsenal triple defence, which actually is not the reason I thought of. I just thought of it there. But that feels a bit weird as well, to use 2 transfers to get rid of Saka to get 3 Arsenal defenders. The only reason I can think of is you're going to get priced out of Cole Palmer. Saka's 10.1. A lot of people would have bought at 10. Palmer's gone up to 10.7. There is a chance that he might rise again before the deadline. You just really want him as a long-term hold, and you're going to get priced out if you don't move it. In that case, maybe there's a small argument to do it. But even then, I'd probably just rather roll the transfer and maybe free funds up somewhere else later down the line. Because when you get to Game Week 8, look, if Palmer goes and gets another 25 points in Game Week 7, then maybe it's just a case of just bring him in at all costs. But when you get to Game Week 8, he's going to have Liverpool away, so it's not going to feel as much of a necessity to bring him in. So, yeah, I think you've got to keep Saka. If you're on wildcard, maybe it's a little bit different. Although I think most people will try and fit in Saka, Palmer and Harden in that case. But maybe as a long-term move, you don't go for him on wildcard. I think if it's just a transfer, he's got to stay. So lots of people have been talking about Jadon Sancho this week. Just over 75,000 transfers in ahead of Game Week 7. And you can see why. In the last 3 matches for Chelsea, he's only started twice against West Ham and Brighton. And yet he's got 4 assists. So he got 45 minutes against Bournemouth in Game Week 4. 56 against West Ham in Game Week 5, and then 70 in the game week just gone against Brighton. And he's walked away with 4 assists in 171 minutes. That's a pretty nice return. So it makes sense why people are looking at him. I think fixture-wise, you can frame it in different ways. 3 of the next 4, not bad. Forest at home, Newcastle at home, Man United away. 2 of the next 5, not great. Liverpool away in 8, and Arsenal at home in 11. But from 12 onwards, the Chelsea fixtures are really good. Right, and I've already spoken about Cole Palmer in yesterday's video, how a lot of people at that point will probably just put him in and leave him for a while. So I think looking at Chelsea players in general makes a lot of sense. And for 6.4 million, Sancho is not a bad price, especially if he keeps returning like that. Personally, I just wouldn't go there. The fact that he keeps getting subbed off early wouldn't be ideal, right? And yes, the minutes are building up a little bit, but it doesn't mean that can't change. And at some point, he could get benched. I think right now, he's in that first 11 from Maresca. They've got so many options that could change. So that would worry me a little bit, the minutes. And also, the underlying numbers are just not that good. I know the returns, actual returns, have been great, which is all that really matters. But for predicting future returns, expected data is pretty decent. and he's running at 0.04 expected goals per 90, which is awful, and 0.3 expected assists. Now, with more minutes and getting used to how Maresca wants to play at a new club, maybe those numbers will go up. And we know there's a quality player in there. We just haven't seen it for a while at Man United. And I would expect those numbers to go up, to be honest. But I'm not sure they're going to get to a point with the minutes that he's getting where he's going to be a great pick. Like, I'm already like a little bit put off by Luis Díaz, and he started every game. I'm even less sure about Jadon Sancho. For me, for Chelsea players, it's Palmer, maybe Jackson up front, and that's it. I would just worry about everyone else's minutes way too much. And you could turn around and say, I just worry in general too much about those things and it doesn't matter. That's fine. If you want to put him in, you absolutely should. But that is why I would not buy him. Palmer, great. Jackson's fine. The only reason I'm not super high on Jackson is because I think there's other good players in the forward line. Sancho, Neto, players like that. I've just got very little interest. I understand why people are putting Palmer in now and just leaving him in. But Sancho, buying him before Liverpool away in 8, could get subbed off early in any of these games. The underlying numbers don't look fantastic. Like, I just don't see him as a particularly amazing FPL option, even though he's clearly a good player. So the next player I want to talk about has had nearly 200,000 transfers out this week. He's dropped from 7 million at the start of the season to 6.8 now, and that is, of course, Eze. And if you've held him through the first 6 matches, he's got 1 return, which is the goal against Chelsea. Very frustrating. I see why people are getting rid of him. But I would say this, and this will sound controversial to some people and then not at all to others. If I had 7 million or under to spend on a midfielder, my choices were Jadon Sancho or Eze, I would pick Eze without giving it too much thought whatsoever. And that is mostly because Eze always plays 90 minutes every single game so far, and the underlying numbers are just better. And I know the comments that are coming, expected goals, expected assists, they don't matter. Jadon Sancho's confident now he's at Chelsea. You know, he's got the returns. Chelsea are playing better than Palace. I get that. But as individual FPL picks, if I was trying to predict who will get points going forward, it would definitely be Eze. Like 0.38 expected goals per 90 is decent. It's much higher than someone like Sancho, much higher than a lot of other players in and around this price. A bit of assist threat there as well. And if Mateta's not on the pitch at any point, Eze's next in line for penalties. And at some point, he might even take one ahead of Mateta as well. So I still think there are reasons to be confident in Eze moving forward. But I also completely get why people are selling. It's very difficult to hold a player that's blanking and dropping in price constantly, especially when they've got Liverpool and Spurs in the next 3. So if you are moving him on for, I don't know what people are doing, like Díaz, for example, maybe going to Brennan Johnson, Maddison, whoever it might be, I think it's fine. And I get why you've done it. I didn't hold him on wildcard, although I was very close to picking him. But I do think once you get past the Spurs game in 9, like 10 onwards are probably fine. Like you've got Wolves away, Fulham at home, Villa away, Newcastle at home, Ipswich away, a player that loves to shoot. The numbers are there. It's just a case of when are the returns coming. He's done it once. Can he do it again? And he actually started off last season quite slow as well. And then after a while, the returns started coming. But yeah, I can't sit here and tell you it's crazy to get rid. I just can't. Not with Liverpool next and then Forest away, which are a pretty good defensive team. But I still think for his price, he's one of the best options. Like, that's part of the reason on wildcard that I was never really looking at Maddison or Bowen. Because as much as I thought they were pretty good picks, I just couldn't spend 0.5, 0.6 million more than just going for Eze. Like, I don't think they're that much better. But who knows? I mean, Palace aren't playing that well. The pressure will start to increase. And maybe that will filter down to the manager, the team, etc. And maybe the lack of the returns will continue. But I just look at that Palace team and think they're a good team. They've got quality players like Eze, Mateta, and Nketiah in there as well. The returns have to come at some point, especially with the amount of shots this guy takes. So I think it's perfectly reasonable to get rid. But I don't think in and around that price, there's a huge amount of standout. These players are definitely miles better options. Maddison, Johnson, I've mentioned them a lot in this video already. Fine. I would not be moving to Chelsea players, apart from Palmer, in midfield. And then if I look at other transfers being made this year, I mean, Mbeumo, fine. Right? If you're going Eze to Mbeumo, absolutely I would do it. Eze to McNeil, again, fixture-wise and over the next 3, definitely better. If you're using it to fund another move, absolutely fine. So actually, maybe there are a few players that I would move Eze for, but not many others. Like, even if you had one or two Arsenal players and you had a spot for Martinelli or Trossard, again, for the next two, Southampton at home and Bournemouth away, not bad. If you're wildcarding soon, you could maybe make a short-term punt and then come off it when you activate the chip. But if I'm looking to hold someone from now for a while, I'd probably still rather go for Crystal Palace Eze rather than Martinelli or Trossard. So yeah, I guess it comes down to who you're selling him for. And like I said, I think it's fine to sell him if you want to. I'll leave it there because I'm just rambling about him now. I've got confidence the returns will come, but I don't have him in my team, so maybe that's easy to say. If you've enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button. Rate 5 stars if you listen on podcast. If you haven't checked out Sleeper, links in the description below. Make sure to get your Champions League pick'em selections done before the matches kick off tonight. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow with the Game Week preview, and I'll see you then.